So thank you, Michelle. Hi, Michelle is managing editor of American Purpose. I'm Jeff Gedman, CEO, editor-in-chief of American Purpose. We're delighted to welcome you all today. People often run a little bit late, but we'll have other colleagues joining us in the next 2-3 minutes. This session is recorded. It'll be posted, the YouTube video, including on our site in the next day or so. It's my pleasure and privilege to welcome Robert Shafer, who is artistic director and conductor of the Washington City Choir. Bob has held so many positions over the years, it's too many to count. He started his career as a music director at James Madison High School in Vienna, Virginia. He's been music director at St. Matthew's Cathedral in Washington. He's been music director at the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. He's been music director of the Oratorio Society. He's composed and conducted around the world. He was a student of the great composition teacher Nadia Boulanger, and Bob has worked with and prepared choruses for, good heavens, I could only mention a few. It would take 30 minutes. Leonard Bernstein, Aaron Copland, Mstislav Rostropovich, and so on and so forth. We're going to talk about an upcoming program. We're going to talk, Bob, about your career and your next steps. But first of all, Robert Shafer, welcome. Thank you for spending time with us today.
Thank you, Jeff. It's a delight to be here.
Thank you. Let's start concrete. Bob, you're leading a program in Washington, D.C. at Washington National Cathedral on the 26th of June. We're going to unpack a little bit what you're going to be performing and conducting that day at Washington National Cathedral. But tell us first a little bit about the program, a little bit about the purpose, and a little bit about how Ukraine fits into this, because it's a musical afternoon and evening, but Ukraine is not unrelated.
No, not at all. Well, the principal program on piece on the program is the German Requiem of Johannes Brahms. This is I'm retiring from the city choir this summer, but we'll be pursuing some other projects after that. But I wanted, since I've been conducting groups in Washington since 1968, when I started at James Madison High School, that's some 54 years ago, I wanted to do something very, very special, and that is the Brahms Requiem. I'll talk more about the actual text of the piece and the fact that its primary purpose is to encourage people to seek comfort through prayer and meditation rather than eternal life in the Christian sense. But it's a perfect piece for a final concert. I've done it many times in my career. I love it very much. And I wanted to open the concert, so that we could have something to allow latecomers to be seated and not interrupt the Brahms. So we're opening with the Elgar Nimrod from his Enigma Variations, which is a gorgeous piece for just the orchestra that shows them off, and about only 4 minutes long. It's a perfect in contrast with the Brahms. We'll talk a little bit more, I guess, later about the Ukraine connection, but I thought, of course, we've all been moved profoundly by this tragic and disastrous war in Ukraine. And I was thinking, starting a couple of months ago, if there would be some way we could also dedicate this piece and this performance to those that have lost their lives in fighting this unjust war from Ukraine, and also the Ukrainian people who have suffered so much and whose lives have been upended, in tragic and profound ways. And so I talked to you, Jeff, about the idea, and then we pursued it. And the concert is being supported by the embassy, and the ambassador is presenting the concert under her honorary patronage. And we hope that many of the Ukrainian community and people around the city can attend this concert because of the much more important than my retirement, the dedication to the people of Ukraine and support and in memory of those that have lost their lives. Because of this, I composed recently, end of April, a very short Ukrainian prayer in Ukrainian, which works perfectly to open the concert and give it the tone that we want to mark the afternoon. And then we will have the Elgar Nimrod variations, which is, again, a gorgeous piece of music. And it's associated often with Winston Churchill and the end of World War II in London. It was played at Churchill's funeral. I'm sure if you heard it, you would recognize it. It's one of the Great Britain's greatest pieces of music and greatest composers, Edward Elgar. So I think that's gives you a general sketch of the program. My piece, then the Elgar Nimrod, and then finally and conclusively the Brahms German Requiem.
Jeff, you're muted.
Forgive me. I'm going to ask you, Michelle, when you have a moment, to put into chat information about the concert, how one obtains tickets if one is fortunate enough to be here local for that on June 26th. And we'll come back to your piece, the Elgar, and your piece in a few moments, Bob. Let's talk about the Brahms for a few minutes. I would like to hear from you why you selected this piece. Would you tell us a little bit about what motivated Brahms to write his Requiem? And if I may just pile in the third question, why is it called a German Requiem?
Well, let me, those are three questions. I will just respond to all three of them and say Brahms was very moved to write this Requiem by two deaths of people very close to him. In 1855, he lost his dear friend and mentor, Robert Schumann, who was another great composer from 19th century Europe and Germany. And poor Schumann had suffered throughout his life of mental illness and schizophrenia specifically, and jumped into the Rhine. And this terribly crushed Johannes Brahms. And he was very close not only to Robert Schumann, but to his wife, Clara Schumann, who was one of Europe's greatest concert pianists. And they developed a lifelong friendship and no kind of intimate relationship whatsoever. But they were very, very close. And actually, Clara had just finished a concert tour of England and wasn't going to hear the premiere of the Brahms Requiem in Bremen, Germany in 1865. And so, but she surprised him and did come to the concert. Brahms was what we would call an agnostic, but a humanist at the same time. I think this is very, very important. He loved people. He knew that people suffered greatly. He had, well, I can't say a joyous, happy life. He was so dedicated and so committed to his composition that he just could not find a way to share his life with another person, a woman in particular. And he was rather lonely, although his friendship with Clara Schumann sustained him. But the fact is, he was not a churchgoer, but like Handel, was a great student of the Bible and knew the Bible, Luther's translation in German of the Bible. He knew it intimately well. And his idea about writing a requiem, because of the fact he was not a Christian in the sense of believing in the divinity of Jesus Christ, he did not want to set the traditional Latin requiem text that so many composers set, from Mozart to Berlioz to everybody. So he selected texts from the Bible in German, but never once is the word Jesus Christ mentioned. And the conductor of the world premiere complained about this. He was a Christian, and it was done in Bremen on Good Friday of 1865. And it was the music director and conductor at the cathedral said, "Can't you add something that talks about Jesus Christ into your requiem?" And he said, "Absolutely not. My intention here is to comfort those that have lost, and that is to ask God that they be remembered through their good works. But most important is the comforting of humanity at the sense of loss. And at the experience of loss." And so he said, "I would rather rename the piece," Brahms said this, "a human requiem rather than a German requiem. The only reason it's called a German requiem is because it's in German. And it's from the Bible, the Martin Luther's translation. So he said, it is not a Christian requiem whatsoever. And he himself was, as I said, a humanist, but an agnostic in the Christian sense. So that's what it was called. And instead, the music director of the cathedral added, "I know that my Redeemer liveth," from the Messiah of Handel, and a duet from the St. Matthew Passion of Bach, to give some Christian gesture on Good Friday. And then Brahms himself conducted the world premiere of the Requiem right after the two pieces by Handel and Bach.
So that's very helpful. So you'll be conducting the Elgar, the new piece you've composed, and the Brahms Requiem at Washington National Cathedral, June 26th. Bob, if you agree, shall we hear something from the Brahms Requiem right now?
I think that would be perfect.
Okay, Michelle, we're going to hear the first portion, and then Bob will invite you to speak about it a little bit. But Michelle, we're going to hear Sir Colin Davis conducting the first 4 minutes of the Brahms Requiem.
Excellent.
So that was a little abrupt. Sorry about that. We were hoping for fade out. At any case, that's a little bit of a taste of the beginning. Bob, would you say a little bit about what we're hearing and then speak a little bit more to the content of the music?
Yeah, the first movement that we just heard is unusual and extremely beautiful for some unusual compositional reasons. He wanted to create a very comforting, quiet opening to the Requiem, and it opens with the word Selig sind. Blessed are those that mourn. It's interesting that he immediately turns to the human comfort that is his intention in the piece. And he wants to create a very intimate, quiet, rather dark, but not depressingly so, atmosphere. So he leaves out the violins altogether, if you notice, and you couldn't see that, but it's just the violas and the cellos and basses and the strings. And then the woodwinds sort of are more prominent in the higher registers of hearing the melody. So it's a very interesting orchestration. He doesn't bring in the violins till the second movement. And this first movement is about 7 to 8 minutes long, but it's perfect. But rather than immediately addressing the dead, it addresses those that are the living, the ones that are left behind, the ones that we want to comfort. And that's why I think this is so important and such a perfect piece to dedicate to the Ukrainian people that are left behind and have lost so much, not only of their human loss, but of their country itself physically. So it couldn't be a more perfect piece to do and dedicated to the Ukrainian people.
Bob, I have two more questions, my side right now, before we open it up to Q&A from the gallery. One is about the space and the pieces you've chosen for the program. It's a large space with a particular acoustic. It's not the Kennedy Center concert hall. What are the advantages and what are the things that as performers you'll have to navigate for this program in Washington National Cathedral?
Well, of course, any large church like Washington Cathedral or the National Shrine where I worked and is going to have a great deal of reverberation and spaciousness. That can be a challenge, or it can be something that can be used and really savored. And certainly the world premiere of the Brahms Requiem under his direction was in the Bremen Cathedral, which is a large Gothic cathedral, similar to the Washington Cathedral. So Brahms was certainly aware of this, and actually, I think, preferred it to a drier concert hall space. And of course, you have this Gothic majesty and the art of architecture and space also contributing to the entire aesthetic impact of the music. It's a true marriage of architecture and space and text and music. And so I rather than find it a challenge and a difficulty, something that I actually savor the sound of this piece in the cathedral. And Brahms was fully aware that would be the acoustics that the piece would be performed in mostly. And so I can go into all sorts of technical reasons and I don't want to bore you, but the way the chords are paced, they don't change very quickly, which would cause a blur. It would be like playing the piano with the pedal held down. He changes the harmonies, the chords, in a slower pace so that the reverberation doesn't blur as it would be, as I said, playing a piece of music with the damper pedal held down the whole time. He uses the acoustics. He's fully aware of the spatial acoustics, and I think that's how he envisioned it, much as our dear friend Sir John Tavener did. In 2012, when he told me he was so delighted the concert, which was originally to be at the Kennedy Center, was moved to Washington Cathedral, because that was the acoustic he savored, and it supported his concept of musical composition.
So, Bob, thank you. My final question before we open up to all of you. We'll have full 30 minutes for Q&A, hard stop 1 p.m. Eastern. Talk to us a little bit about your piece on the program. And if you would, Bob, a little bit about the creative process. I think many of us don't fully understand how composers work. And I understand it varies, but in your case, how you come to tackle such an assignment, if I may put it that way, what's involved, and how you compose the piece Prayer for Ukraine.
Well, this is an interesting, and I appreciate you attending my premiere at the end of March of my major work that I had spent over a year composing, in memoriam, which was dedicated to all those people that have lost their lives to COVID. And that was done at a beautiful Catholic church in McLean, Virginia. And I was compositionally exhausted from that. It really, I would say, a solid year of work. And it came and it developed in sections. And a composer does that once there's this involvement, and it's really a spiritual movement that takes over you. That, and I'm not saying that God, I mean, don't listen, I'm not making a sacrilegious statement, but tap me on the shoulder and say, you're going to write this piece. But there's a feeling of, once the process starts, once the engines start going, it's with you constantly. I mean, even when you're sleeping. And it's not something that you do from 9 to 12 every morning, and then you go about your day. I mean, even if you have other things to do, it's in your subconscious and conscious, and it sort of flows back and forth until the piece is finished. With the Prayer for Ukraine, once I knew that we were going to be able to do this, and had decided to do this, I thought immediately, well, I was going to open the program with the Elgar, but a very short piece of music that would be specifically Ukrainian, and in the Ukrainian language, a short prayer would dedicate more specifically the memorial aspect of those that have lost their lives in this war with Russia in Ukraine. And so it popped into my head. I immediately went online, looked for Ukrainian prayers, short prayers. I did not want this to be long. It's only about 2.5 minutes long. I just wanted it to make something specifically in Ukrainian, a prayer for peace and for deliverance. And I found a perfect short prayer, and got some guidance on the pronunciation of and some experts helped me very much with the language, which is completely foreign to me. And we had it transliterated, which you have to do because, Americans certainly cannot pronounce the Cyrillic alphabet. And so I had it transliterated and got it done. But once the piece, when I started it, I said, I'm really still exhausted from in memoriam, and I'm really busy with this concert preparation. So how can I take on writing something? But as they say, music you don't select music if you are born to be a musician. Music selects you, and composition of music selects you. So I felt that I had been selected to write this short prayer for the Ukraine, for Ukrainian people. And I just started on it. I mean, every available moment. And it came rather quickly, the basic shape of it. And then it was a question of refining it, which, I mean, the piece is conceived by a composer in its entirety. I mean, my teacher, Mademoiselle Boulanger, used to say, this piece should do this. This should be its shape. This is where it should start. This is where it should go. This is where it should end. She would use these exact words. And, but she says, you figure out the notes. I'm not concerned about the notes. You figure out the notes. But this is what the piece should be. This is what it should say. And sometimes these are very vague terms that you might not understand, because language cannot express these purely aesthetic principles. They're just a very crude way of suggesting where one might go. And then it becomes something that is truly spiritual, emotional, intellectual coming together. And it can hit you in the middle of the night, it can hit you anywhere. But I felt that I had been selected, that whether I was tired or not, I was going to do this. And it only took me a week to really get it done. And it's actually quite lovely. And the chorus loves it, and it's not difficult. And so I think it's a perfect brief gesture to the Ukrainian people before the Elgar. And then, of course, the magnificent Brahms, which is about an hour and 10 minutes.
So thank you. And then, dear colleagues, we have a half an hour left. Press the raise hand function or wave through the screen. When I miss you, Michelle is good about telling me who is waiting. And so the floor is open. Who would like to begin? Michelle, anybody there in the gallery that you see?
Yes, Fritz Heinzen has his hand up.
There we are. Fritz, you have the floor and welcome.
Good morning, or good afternoon now. Ein Deutsches Requiem, it's such a beautiful choice. I have a number of CDs of that. This should be a marvelous performance. But I'd love to get your opinion. There are many, many versions of Brahms' work on CD. What are two or three of the ones that maybe stand out to you? What are the ones that I may not have in my collection and I should be getting?
That's an excellent question. And so often with the major works that are, often done, the Fauré Requiem, the Missa Solemnis of Beethoven, the major choral works, I will have one that I prefer. But as you go through your life as a conductor, and I'm now 76, and I've been doing this since I was 23, so some 54 years or so, I developed, I've listened to so many recordings of a piece, and then I've performed the piece myself. And no matter, when you first perform a work, you're very influenced by the recordings you've heard. And so you come up with the way you think it should go. But as you work on it in rehearsal, what evolves for you is the most natural tempo that you can make the piece speak in. And after a while of doing I've probably done the Brahms Requiem 15 to 20 times. I really don't know, but I've done it through over a half century, enough to develop what I think works. Now, I still listen to other recordings. I listen to new recordings, and I always find things that I think are beautiful. and some things that may suggest maybe a slight slowing down or speeding up of the way I normally do it. I don't consider that once you have your concept of a piece, that it's cast in bronze, and that's the way you do it, and nothing's going to influence that. That's really not the case, at least with me. And the conductors that I have admired and respected are always open to new ideas and will try new things. But when push comes to shove in the end result, you have, through vast experience of study, and sometimes I've had a score like the Brahms that I've done so many times that it's falling apart, or there's so many marks in it that I can't even see the notes. So I just get a whole brand new score and start over again. I've done that, say, with Handel's Messiah. I know for a fact I did that with that. And I have not done that. I still use my original score, and I'm just more economical in the way I mark it. But so it's interesting. I'm very interested in new recordings and YouTubes that I watch, and some things I suggest maybe I should try something like that, or other things I say, my God, that horrible. You could never do that this way. And the pronunciation of German is so challenging because there's various dialects, and the Berlin Germans speak with very closed vowels, and the Southern Germans a different kind of accent. And Brahms was from Hamburg, Germany, in the more northern part of Germany. And of course, I never heard Brahms speak German, and then you have to make lyrical diction decisions about, how do you sing this piece? You don't sing it exactly the way you speak it, the German language. And so there's lyric diction questions that have to be had. But I don't want to go on and get off track. To answer your question, I'm always listening to new recordings. I'm sure I haven't heard every single one, but I have many recordings, and I'm YouTube. I find things that maybe a live performance. I just listened the other night to the Claudio Abbado performance that he conducted near the end of his life with the Berlin Philharmonic. It's on YouTube. It's a beautiful recording, and everyone knows that poor Maestro Abbado was dying of cancer, but which adds a certain dimension that deepens the impact of the piece for me and for all those that performed and heard it. So I highly recommend, and it's a beautifully engineered telecast of it, the way they cover the orchestra, the singers, the Abbado himself. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Well, thank you. It was interesting to hear your whole wider discussion of the impact of others.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
So Fritz, thank you. Bob, thank you. And I'm looking at my screen and also to Michelle for a heads up about who might have a next question or comment. Anybody right now, Michelle, that I'm not seeing?
I don't see an official hand up, but is Louis Reith trying to get our attention? No.
He says no. And then Donna, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone.
Hello, Donna, my dear friend.
Well, yes, I'm so happy to see you. I'm here in Iowa, and I wish I was there. I'm still hoping to get to the concert. You've made me think about so many things this morning. And especially I was thinking about the fact that Brahms was not a Christian, but he spent so much time with the Bibles. There are some of us who do a good job of borrowing the best from all of the different denominations. And we might be singing Jewish or singing Catholic or singing Protestant any particular Sunday. And I've been able to sing in so many of those great places and spaces but I'm not sure I know other composers who were agnostics, writing humanist works within Christian settings. I certainly can think of the meditative people like Pert and Britten and Nestor, our dear friend Leo Nestor, who wrote so beautifully for big cathedral spaces. But I'm not sure I know of any humanistic Gnostics who've written extensively for that space.
Well, you know, I think a lot of them don't write about it or discuss it. Some have, and I have my suspicion of others. Gabriel Fauré, who was the teacher of my teacher, was a Roman Catholic, and he worked at the Church of the Madeleine in Paris for years. But the things that he wrote about his own particular faith make me wonder if he was not more of a humanist agnostic. He was not the student of the Bible, as was Handel or Brahms, but you know, it's just hard to say. Some of them don't discuss it or write about it. Others do. A very specific. Benjamin Britten, I suspect, was more of a humanist agnostic. And I don't say this in any critical way. I'm just saying they're not. Now, I know Leo Nestor, our dear friend, had a deep faith, a Roman Catholic faith. But when he was close to his untimely death, I remember I read a quote that he told a dear friend that he had his hopes as he approached death. And so rather than, being sure, he had his hopes, he had his faith, but as he approached death. So I think everyone has their own particular belief system. And I'm very comfortable with whatever anyone and everyone, how they resolve this in their mind. But since we're talking about Brahms today, and he was definitely did not want to add a Christian aspect to his Requiem. He was a German, he was a I shouldn't say that. Oh my God, I'm making such a generality. But he was a man. Misogyny in the 19th century, especially in Germany with men, was horrible. They thought women should not be professionals. They should not be certainly musicians or composers, that they should stay home and take care of the children. And he was always criticizing Clara. That's probably why they never got anywhere in the intimate relationship, because he would drive her crazy. She would have to go on concert tours. She was a great pianist to earn money to support her 7 children, and her husband was gone. And he would say, you should stay home and take care of the children and just teach in some music school so you can be home. You shouldn't be concertizing, and lots of major composers were that. It was just the 19th century. It was just a reality. I'm not condemning them, but he was not what we would call, he was just a man. He could be very stubborn. And he was definitely stubborn about insisting he would not add the mention of Jesus Christ to his German Requiem. That was not his intention. It wasn't in a blasphemous way, but that was not his intention. That's not what he wanted the piece to say, that it was for those that are still with us. That was his intention. Blessed are those that mourn, for they shall be comforted. That's the first movement, the first statement. And, at the very end, he says, blessed are the dead who rest in the Lord. So he makes a gesture towards a faith in a higher power, a God, being the comfort of those that are past at the very end. But not in the faith of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. That is not something he wanted to put. So there we have it. I mean, you know, it's everybody is unique in their belief system, and but Brahms was a, you know, a stubborn German sometimes, and he could be very difficult with people, especially other women. And that's why he never could marry or would marry. He loved women, but unfortunately found his his female needs met by those that were paid for when he was young in Hamburg. So there you have it. I mean, he was a beautiful man, one of the greatest composers of all time. And the Requiem, you know, actually established him then as probably the greatest composer in Europe at the time. Before, he was respected, and he thought that, you know, people respected him and knew of him. But after the Requiem premiere, German Requiem, he was then, that elevated him to a new status. And he did not, you know, he did not write pieces, for instance, on order. Beethoven and Mozart, someone would say, would you write a piece for my Maestro or Mozart, for instance, of the Requiem? And then this is what I want, how long it should be. And they would do it. Now, the Requiem is a great piece. So we don't want to get into the Mozart Requiem because that's another program. But they wrote these pieces on order to make money. And sometimes they weren't very good. Brahms never did that. If someone would say, write me a piece for my wedding anniversary, he would say, no, I don't write music on order. He only wanted to produce masterworks after the Requiem success. And he started and wrote many pieces he threw away in the trash can. That probably Beethoven or Mozart or even Bach, who did the same thing, might have thrown, you know, kept in his library or kept in his catalog as pieces. So if you notice, every piece Brahms wrote after the Requiem could be considered a masterpiece in its own right. That's a long answer to your questions. I'm sorry.
Thank you. And if I could toss out just a comment to Fritz about his comment about multiple versions of things.
Yes.
If you pay attention to estate sales in Maryland, you might find what I found, which is 50 different versions of Schubert's Winterreise. And I felt like the collection needed to be kept together. And so for $10, I got 50 different copies of Winterreise. I'm still listening through, and I have 3 versions of Ian Bostrick, young, middle-aged, and older.
Oh,
so
my.
There's some real treasures to be found at estate sales in Maryland.
Yeah, I've played Winterreise with a singer, and it's a magnificent song. It's like Schubert.
So thank you, Donna. We're into the home stretch. In chat, Laura Bradford asks Bob about Brahms' Requiem, the addition of a 5th movement and connection to Brahms's mother, if I read that a moment ago accurately.
Yes, that's a good question. Thank you, Laura. The original, at the world premiere, there were only 6 movements to the Requiem. And it was a great success. And that was, I think, in, as I said, 1865. At about 1867 or 1868, Brahms still had not gotten over the death of his mother, who had died 10 years before. And Schumann probably, and a colleague of his said, perhaps you should write one more movement for your Requiem. And it could come after the 4th movement, before the 6th, and maybe have a soprano solo. So it was, whoever this friend was, suggested that having a soprano solo or a soloist plus the choir, and be very gentle and something to sort of calm the waters after the storming conclusion of the fourth movement with this huge grand fugue. And so Brahms thought about it and said, yeah, I agree. And so he wrote this and short piece, and it talks about the love, a loving mother. And it's quite intimate with a beautiful soprano soloist, the choir and just hushed tones under all of it. And the orchestra, not all of them playing, just ravishingly beautiful woodwind lines and string textures, very calming, very gentle. And then that relaxes the atmosphere and then sets off in low relief the beginning of the sixth movement, which is also ends with a storming, glorious fugue very powerfully. And then the sense of aesthetic resolution at the last movement, which brings back ideas from the first movement. So the first performance of what we know as a Brahms Requiem with 7 movements wasn't done until 1869, some 4 years after the world premiere, because the 7th movement did not exist in 1865. So, and we've kept doing that 7 movement work. And I could go into all sorts of reasons why it seemed preordained by God that it be 7 movements, because it makes it so symmetrical. Then the first and the 7th are related, and they are. And 2 and 6 are related, and 3 and 5 are related. And then at the center, you have this gorgeous, how lovely is thy dwelling place, which is probably the most famous movement of all from the Brahms Requiem. So it has perfect symmetry in 7 movements. So at any rate, that's an interesting question. Thank you, Laura.
So, Bob, I have 2 final questions, and then we'll wrap. The first, you mentioned that Gabriel Fauré was the teacher of your teacher, Nadia Boulanger. And as you reflect on your life and career as conductor, composer, and also teacher, I neglected to say you've taught and were professor at Shenandoah Conservatory. I told you it was too much to list in an introduction. One could go on, but in a handful of words, in a couple minutes, Bob, could you reflect a little bit on her influence on your musical life? And did you ever study the Brahms Requiem when you were studying with her in Fontainebleau?
Actually, no, I never studied the Brahms Requiem with her. And, she admired Brahms, but she never talked about him. She never mentioned Brahms. She never used Brahms music as an example of something or other. It's just funny that way. I mean, Brahms did not like France or the French people. He didn't like the England or the English people. He was a German, and he stayed in Germany, I think, his whole life. But at any rate, I don't know what the reason was, but so she never spoke about it. But to answer your question, I think 2 things come to mind that she influenced me greatly. It was the respect for discipline and working as hard as you possibly could at your chosen field, or if the field has chosen you. She would tell me to prepare this or prepare that and do that, and I would do it. I would, she would have me memorize whole scores, and then I would have to play them on the piano. And she would try to trip me up. I remember the Stravinsky Mass once. She said, memorize the first movement for next week. I said, did? Came in, played the whole thing. Then she said, now play from memory the second trumpet and the bass trombone alone. Well, my goodness, I mean, I could play the whole thing, the whole harmonic structure, but when you have 20 parts, to have each part independently and be able to select out of that, I said, Mademoiselle, I will try. And I stumbled around, and she said, but you must remember You must do, have you done everything you could do to prepare, you know? And I could never say yes. I mean, can any of us? Have you done every single thing? Sometimes you have to say, I've done everything I can with at this point in time. For instance, if the concert's next week, I have to say, okay, now I have to think about the entire project. And you're often distracted with, you know, production things like how many people are on the risers, and, you know, where is the orchestra going to sit, and which players, and, you know, you can't be thinking about that. But that respect of have you done all that you can do is very, very important. And the other thing I would say about her that would differ from other composition teachers was she did not say, this is the way I write music, this is the way you should write music, and we're just going to write copies of my style. A lot of composition teachers do that. If you went and studied with, you know, whoever, you would come out writing music that sounded a little bit, say, Aaron Copland. I don't know that for a fact, but, you know, you would come out writing Copland sounding pieces because that's the way they wrote. With Boulanger, she spent the first, say, month when you had studied with her, looking and listening to as many of your own pieces as possible to get to know who you are, what is your style. And then she would try to help you speak your own language better. And that was such a gift. So none of her composers, students, sounded like a preconceived. She admired Igor Stravinsky immensely, but she did not try to make people write music that sounded like Stravinsky. She was not a composer herself. She had given it up in her early 20s to become a teacher. So that was just such a gift, the gift of discipline and the gift of helping me speak my language better. You know, not trying to copy some master of the 20th, 21st century, but to speak my language better. And that was such a gift. And it really helped me in my own teaching of conducting and composition. You know, how do you teach a left-handed conductor to conduct? I mean, sometimes it's a challenge and you have to reverse things, but I don't want to get into that. So those were her two principal gifts in very large boxes. But I probably studied with her 9 summers. The 10th summer, she was very ill and in the hospital. But I did get to the funeral, and with Princess Grace and Prince Rainier from Monaco, who Prince Rainier had actually studied with Nadia Boulanger as a child. So I hope that answers your question.
Bob, very helpful. Final question, you all, and then we'll conclude. As you step down as artistic director of the Washington City Choir and you go on to compose and guest conduct and travel, Bob, there will be a new artistic director. Could you tell us, as you step away, who's stepping up and taking your place?
Her name is Erin Freeman, and she is an absolute marvelous conductor. She is presently the conductor of the Richmond Symphony Chorus, and she's a professor at Virginia Commonwealth University. We had over 50 applicants and narrowed it down, the search committee did, to 10 finalists, and then there were 3 finalists, and they all came and actually auditioned with the chorus. And to my mind, she was clearly the one for the job. But I was out on the committee and I didn't make the selection. The chorus had input and the board had input, and then of course the search committee. And they all agreed that Erin Freeman would be the best. I knew of her work, and she was a great devotee of Robert Shaw, as I am. I'm a great admirer of Shaw. And so the technique of building a choral instrument is kind of similar. And so I think that's going to make it a very smooth transition. But she has her own ideas, and her season next year is sort of different from the kind of season I do, but still just as interesting and valid. And you want that. You want the new, fresh ideas. And she's doing the Rossini Petit Messe Solennelle to open her first concert with, which is marvelous, first that I never did before. And so the chorus gets to sing a brand new work, and it's a masterpiece in its own self. I just never got into it. And so Erin Freeman is her name, and she takes over officially July 1. But she's doing some things in August, season things, and then starts after Labor Day in full. So the city choir will be publicizing the schedule of the concerts for next year, and I hope you'll come, and I'll be there, so we'll get to see each other. So yeah, I'm very delighted with Erin Freeman as being the new director.
So Bob, thank you. Everybody, thank you for your valuable time for this hour well spent. If you're in a position to do so, and if your camera is turned off, consider turning it on just for a moment so people can greet one another and say goodbye or good afternoon and good evening. So June 26th, Washington National Cathedral, Brahms, Elgar, Shafer, you all have been a delight. And Robert Shafer, Bob, excited about the next steps, and thanks for spending this time with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thanks, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening. Bye.
Good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.